Hello and welcome. I'm Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all of the UFO, UAP news from everywhere and anywhere. Today I'll be reviewing the most famous abduction case in Miami history. On the evening of January the 3rd, 1979, gift shop proprietor Filiberto P. Dennis agreed to accompany his friend Fernando Marti on a trip to the outskirts of Miami to get some barbecue ingredients. Fernando said that he was feeling tired, so Filiberto ended up driving him and his wife and a 13-year-old daughter, Isabel, to two farms negotiating rural roads in bad weather conditions. After some time, Filiberto's station wagon began to lose power and its engine died, not responding at all to attempts to restart it. The men got out and Fernando opened the hood of the car and couldn't locate the problem. After many unsuccessful attempts to restart the car, the pair were sprawled under the hood when they realized the engine was flashing red and violet light in sequence, which is kind of odd, if you ask me. This was also accompanied by a strange sound like a swarm of bees. As the sound and the light illuminated in the engine increased, the whole car started to shake as though there was an earthquake going on. And as an earthquake survivor, Mrs. Marti pulled Isabel down across the car seat and covered her with her own body while screaming in panic. Hearing her cries, Filiberto tried to run to assist, but became paralyzed, feeling as though something restrained and impeded his actions. Fernando tried to take over under the hood, but also found himself immobilized. His feet sticking up in the air, Filiberto felt as if the force that paralyzed him was lifting him and suspending him. He began to shout, "Don't take me, don't take me," as he was lifted off the ground. The noise and the light then ceased, and things seemed back to normal when Fernando emerged from under the hood and looked up at the sky to see what he observed as a bulky object or a UFO that rose and then moved away. Full of fear, he jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine, which was running very weakly, but he managed to return to the highway. He managed to stop at the first gas station he could find, where he called the police, and then he called Filiberto's wife, Iris. He told her a light took Filiberto away. When the three reached the town of Halia, they spotted a police patrol car. Fernando explained what had just happened. The police initially assumed that Filiberto would be found or lost or unconscious, while Fernando, feeling confused, thought that he may be mistaken about what he had just witnessed and returned to look for his friend. The police tried to request the airbase at Homestead to send out an airplane or a helicopter with lights to the location of the incident. While this was all happening, Filiberto was becoming aware of the sound of tires running on pavement. He found himself in the middle of a different highway, the Tami Army Trail, which was about 16 kilometers or approximately 10 miles south of where he had vanished 2 hours before. The police officers who found Filiberto had first thought him inebriated or an assault victim who had been left on the highway. They were unable to communicate with him because of the language barrier and the condition he was in, but searched his pockets and found ID. Filiberto is fluent only in Spanish, having been raised in Cuba. They took him to the police station where Iris and Fernando were waiting. According to one official, something very unusual happened when on the formal report. At the police station, something unusual happened because it's the first time, I believe, that a police report actually is written admitting that an abduction took place. It was a formal report, and under the type of the offense, it was written Close Encounters of the Third Kind, like the movie. This was actually written in the police report. And this may have been the first time in the US that police admitted in an official report that an abduction by a UFO had actually taken place. Okay, later, under hypnotic regression, Filiberto disclosed that after having been paralyzed by a combination of the mysterious light and sound, he woke up in a seat that seemed to hold him in place by a kind of suction which impeded all of his movements. He found himself in a small room surrounded by three strange figures, one of whom approached carrying a strange kind of helmet, which he raised and placed on Filiberto's head. The helmet seemed to be lined with small needles, wow, that pierced his skull, reaching down to his shoulders. The beings tried to communicate with Filiberto, initially speaking in a language that sounded like German. Then, when they realized that he did not understand, they rotated a button on the right side of his chest and spoke in English. When Filiberto indicated that he still did not understand, again the strange beings rotated the button and proceeded to speak in Spanish with a Portuguese or Italian accent. During this process, the beings continued conducting tests on Filiberto's body, eventually leaving 108 marks as evidence of these tests. Okay, so this physical evidence we know, and we also know that somehow the ETs are able to communicate in various languages by using that helmet. Filiberto was taken to another large room where on a high seat resembling a throne sat one of their kind wearing a cape. This individual, who seemed to be in charge, addressed Filiberto in perfect Spanish. Okay, so the leader of these ETs seems to be fluent in Spanish and doesn't need a translator helmet. He was also transmitting ideas telepathically. Their conversation revolved around the subjects of human beings and humanity. On the walls were projected images like large television pictures showing scenes from the human past, present, and future. Following this, the beings then opened a portal, and Filiberto was carried to a small room where he was again placed in a seat, immobilizing him with suction. He was now inside a small craft. Okay, so he goes into a small craft, and in this section of the story, he's actually taken underneath the sea. So we discover that these ETs have a base underneath the sea, which we've often heard in conspiracy circles about ETs having underwater bases. So he's inside a small craft that was discharged from the mothership. Near the end of the flight, Filiberto could observe what appeared to be a stretch of narrow beach approaching as the UFOs proceeded to plunge into the sea. His perception was obscured by the massive velocity at which the craft was traveling. Veering to the right and then beginning to lose speed, ahead Filiberto could now discern a tunnel with walls that seemed illuminated, as if phosphorescent. There the ship entered, eventually coming to a stop in a large cavern that was completely dry, a place that was formed of rock. There he observed two symbols, one of them having the form of a serpent, and this symbol was as large as an electric light pole, while there was another one that was similar but smaller. The ETs disembarked from the ship with Filiberto and took him to a rock where they allowed him to sit down. They opened a huge door from where a number of humans exited. Okay, so in this portion of the story, Filiberto sees humans working alongside the ETs in this underwater sea base. At this time, a person approached Filiberto and said, "Welcome," speaking to him in perfect Spanish with a South American accent. So this guy might possibly be from Miami or Cuba himself. He looked human and informed Filiberto that he was from Earth and had been working with the aliens for some time. As the aliens took Filiberto through to another door and toward a street, he saw what appeared to be a city where they crossed and entered a small building. Filiberto felt himself sucked up against the wall, which then revolved and turned and became a kind of table. From the walls there emerged mechanical arms containing instruments with which they examined and tested his body. Eventually, they let him get up and get dressed again, whereupon they demonstrated, using the wall televisions, new and different events that were going to occur. Okay, so the aliens here taken to a large room, and there he saw a large UFO craft that was standing in a vertical position. They took him inside, and inside he encountered three more of these ETs, who again placed him in a suction seat, then set up the controls and readied the ship for departure. Filiberto was unable to see what was happening outside, and after a short trip, the door of the craft opened and Filiberto was let out of the ship, finding himself in a pasture. On January the 3rd, 1979, Filiberto underwent hypnotic regression. Okay, so this is the part where Filiberto undergoes hypnotic regression. I'm not a big fan of hypnotic regression because, of course, the hypnotist can suggest ideas to the person being hypnotized. Be that as it may, during the hypnotic regression, there were a lot of revelations that Filiberto could not recall about his adventure. So the aliens provided him with a lot of revelations about the future, some of which were, for example, the disastrous 1985 earthquake that destroyed part of Mexico City, the loss of coastal areas in California, for example, the AIDS epidemic, and the Reagan presidency. There was a suggestion on the part of the aliens that they might be collaborating with the Chinese government. And they also predicted the 1981 assassination of the Egyptian president, Anwar Sadat, which led to the Middle East conflict, which they said could put the whole planet in peril. And as we all know, that's been an ongoing issue. Okay, so in this part of the story, I'm going to go over how Filiberto and his wife decide to go back to the site of the abduction. And this is about 6 weeks after the incident. So 6 weeks later, on the night of February the 21st, 1979, Filiberto and his wife, Iris, could not sleep and decided to revisit the place where Filiberto had been abducted. At around 5 a.m., his second encounter with the UFO ship and its occupants took place. After returning home, Filiberto called UFO researchers Sanchez Ozel and reported what had happened that afternoon. Sanchez found out that people at Miami International Airport had witnessed a UFO on that morning observing a large mothership. Apparently, a lot of people at the airport observed a large mothership and an array of smaller objects moving around it. The main craft seemed fixed in the sky and was round with three lights, one very white, one yellow, and the third a more opaque white, which also pulsated. Beside it were two other round, smaller ships with just one light each. Sanchez's group members were able to localize the mothership with the other UFOs directly above the spot where Filiberto had been picked up, where only hours before the second encounter of Filiberto and Iris had occurred. Iris Cardiz later reported that on the right breast of the alien suits, they wore an emblem which comprised of a serpent in the form of an S on top of a wide X-shaped cross. Now, this second abduction is highly unusual, mainly because of Filiberto's wife participating voluntarily in it. She went voluntarily to the encounter, and it's also rare because They received news of the UFO sightings at the same time and place from independent witnesses, giving their second encounter credibility. 6 years later, on December the 6th, 1985, Filiberto claimed that he was again abducted and conveyed to the same base under the sea. On March the 30th, 1986, Filiberto again underwent hypnotic regression. As well as confirming his previous encounters and experiences, he described further predictions imparted to him by the aliens. Okay, so that was the most famous abduction story in Miami's history. I thought it was unusual also because of the fact that Filiberto's wife went along with the abduction voluntarily that second time. And there were also a lot of independent witnesses at the airport that saw this mothership. Hope you enjoyed that. My name is Al Barrows. This has been UFO Disclosure. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks. Thanks for listening to my podcast.